folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. This is Chris once again. Hello, folks, and welcome back once again to Chris Wyatt Reports. This is Chris in central Pennsylvania. This is the Indaba Conversation with Chris. Today, my special feature guest is none other than the conscious clerical Ernst Van Zyl. When last we saw each other and last chatted, it was in person after Google sent me to the wrong place twice. Ernst, hoe gaan dit?
Hello Chris, het gaan baie goed, dankie. Little did we know that there are two streets with the exact same name within a very small radius.
Physically located separate at different geographic directions. One's east, west, one's north, south, and they have the same name. Leave it to the ANC to confuse everybody.
At least you got there, and it was very nice to meet you in person, and I'm glad that you also made it back safely to the USA after your very productive trip and all your meetings and everything here.
Well, thank you. And I did, but I came back with a little bit of crud, and that cough lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then I went to the UK after I was healthy, and I've come back with a crud again with a cough that's lasted for 2 weeks, but it's mostly gone now, so I'm doing better. But events are unfolding as we speak, Ernst. Of course, I'm talking about the joke of a vote in Parliament right now in which the ANC members showing their loyalty to Latuli House get up and emphatically say, no, nay, absolutely no, not voting to accept the report that they themselves commissioned at Parliament to investigate the corruption of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Any thoughts on that before we get into today's topics?
Well, I just wish it worked that way in school when we were in trouble, that all my friends could vote on whether I should sit detention or not. That would have been very nice if the same rules applied there.
Well, yeah, I take it you were a naughty child in school. Anyway.
Chris, I just wanted to mention, I see Gert Jansen van Rensburg and Leuven Jansen van Rensburg is in the chat, and I actually had the privilege of running into them the other day here in Gauteng, in Pretoria. We were just out shopping, and then they recognized me, and we had a very nice chat. So it's nice to see them here. Hello, Gert and Leuven.
They are fantastic supporters of this channel. They've been with me for a very long time. Actually, among the few people that bother to super chat anymore too are those guys. So thank them so much for that. No, that's great. That's pretty cool. You know, it's fascinating. Ernst, while I was in South Africa, walking around, it just proves that we know what's going on. If there ever be any YouTube files like their Twitter files, we'll know the truth about what's going on. But I was recognized 15 different times across the country in 7 provinces where people just came up to me out of the blue and said, hello, Chris. And I had no idea who they were until they introduced themselves. It just shows you that I guess when we speak, our reach is a bit further than we actually realize.
And it also helps having an iconic beard. I think that also went a long way.
Well, I mean, true. It kind of does set me off, and people can see it from a distance. But still, the point is that before the shadow banning went into effect, people discovered who I was in South Africa, and they actually remember me, which was kind of heartwarming. I really enjoyed it. It was a fantastic journey. And when I come back in February, I don't think I could possibly top this previous visit. It was just absolutely amazing. Everyone I met was incredible, including the Afrikaner, the Tswana speaker, and the Indian who helped me when I blew 2 rims outside of Rustenburg on the way to Mahalisburg. That was quite an adventure that day.
But these types of trips are important, Chris, when you have to go speak to people on the other side of the ocean. If you have the privilege of being able to do that, that's the same reason why we went to Europe as well with this liaison tour that we're going to be speaking about today, because you need that. In Afrikaans, the word is so nice. It's skakeling, that connection, the connection between the links, or linking with other groups and other individuals and people that could be very valuable allies in the bigger picture. I mean, no man is an island, but no people or no nation can be an island either. We need to interact with people that are valuable allies and potential friends.
Now, what was the word you used again in Afrikaans for linkage? What was that?
Skakeling.
Skakeling. Okay, that's definitely a word I don't know in Afrikaans. It never appeared in my vocabulary.
Yeah, in Afrikaans, the tour that we did would be called a skakeltour, connection tour, or whatever.
Okay.
It's the closest, but it's not quite the right translation.
Building bridges.
Mm,
Okay.
absolutely, and yeah, no, it's an important thing. Like I said, what you do by visiting South Africa and interacting in person. That's actually the conversation I had with the two Janse van Rensburgs. Is that it is important to meet people in person, to get to know the person behind the username or the profile picture. That's on the small scale, and then on the bigger scale, it's also important to sparkle or to connect with other organizations and people also fighting for the same thing as you, and the people that share your values and share your ideas.
Now that's a bit different than Kalfoot Soki, but anyway, but seriously, let's go ahead and shift to the topic for today. Let me just do a quick check and see what the current vote is over there. It's 204 to 80 right now as the EFF is voting, and we know they're going to vote in mass against or for adopt the report. Anyway, that's that parliamentary vote's ongoing right now, folks. It's a fait accompli because there's 204 ANC corrupt, patronage-seeking Luthuli House loyalists who've already said that they will not accept the report. So it's a done deal. But it is good to catch them on record as they embarrass themselves and show how disconnected they are from the people of South Africa. The ANC is dead. They are destroying their party in front of the world for us to see, and I don't think they're even cognizant that they're doing that. Anyway, Ernst, let's talk about this. So AfriForum, I believe, I don't know if anyone else went, but you and Ernst Rutz went to Geneva to speak to the United Nations recently. Can you tell us a little bit about what that trip was about? What prompted it? Did they invite you? Did you request to go? And tell us a little bit how that went.
Right. So it wasn't just for one thing, it was for a myriad of objectives. But the main ones were to firstly do a speech or a presentation at the 15th session of the United Nations Forum on Minority Issues. We have done this in the past, but only I think we've done it in person a few years ago. And then during the COVID pandemic or during the lockdowns, we did it online. And this year we had the opportunity again to attend and do it in person. And this is something where you apply and then you get accepted or not to be able to get a speaking turn there. And we were fortunate enough to get a speaking turn again. And yeah, you only get 2 minutes. So me and Ernst were hard at work trying to condense all the atrocities and all the horrible stuff going on in South Africa, specifically as it affects minorities, into 2 minutes. But I think we did pretty well. And then Ernst presented the speech. And just a quick touch on what else we were also doing, and we can get into more detail later. I wrote a report on specifically racial discrimination in South Africa, and then also hate speech against minorities in South Africa. So the racial discrimination would be, for example, what Diskem was doing, and hate speech would be what Malema does. And yeah, I did a very detailed report on that, and we handed that in to the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination there in Geneva. And that also went very well. And then the third objective that we wanted to do or needed to do with our trip was to do skakeling, or to connect and build a stronger relationship with our friends in South Tyrol, which is an autonomous province of Italy, where a German-speaking minority has a lot of autonomy over what happens in their province. And they also have a lot of admiration for Afrikaners, and they have created a friendship organization with Afrikaners. And we went there to strengthen that friendship with another folk, or with another nation that strongly identifies with the same values as we do. So those are the three main objectives, in short, that we went for on this trip.
Now that's interesting. You're talking about South Tyrol.
Yes.
Sud Tyrol. Yes, an area I'm very familiar with. I used to spend almost every weekend there. I lived just below South Tyrol when I was stationed in Italy near Vicenza. And I would go to Bozen. The Italians
that's where we were.
They call it Bolzano. I've been to Bozen many, many times. I would go there, and of course, I'm fluent in German, and I would speak German because 3/4 of the people that live there are German speakers. And the market sellers, when I would buy vegetables in the market there, would answer me in Italian. I'd understand them. They'd understand my German. So I'd speak German, they'd speak Italian, and we conduct business. Yeah, South Tyrol, of course, for those who don't know, was part of Austro-Hungary and is populated by Germanic people and has been for millennia. And what happened at the end of the First World War, as a reward for the Italians changing sides, the Allies granted the South Tyrol province to Italy It's a semi-autonomous province in Italy, has almost total control over its own affairs, and it is the most prosperous part of Italy with the lowest unemployment and the highest GDP per capita of the entire country. It's amazing. You've got agriculture, you've got industry, you've got tourism there. It's an absolutely wonderful place. And so how long did you spend there?
We were there for 3 days.
Okay. That's cool. And
Yeah.
what prompted that? I mean, how did that come about? I mean, that you wound up in South Tyrol. I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah, so we can start off with the South Tyrol visit. I think it's an important aspect of why we were on this trip, seeing as, like I said earlier, no people can be an island. You need friends out there, and you need trustworthy allies and people that understand your cause. And the South Tyroleans definitely do. They actually have quite a good knowledge of Afrikaners and our history. There's a lot of parallels between our two groups, and that's why I think this connection was started. The first parallel is their own history of being threatened by an imperial force, and that was in the form of Napoleon in 1809. And they were invaded by Napoleon's forces, and then just a normal guy. What's it called in English? In Afrikaans, it's a herbergier, the man, someone who runs a guest house, but in old times. But anyway, the owner of a halfway stop or a resting place, Andreas Hofer. He became the leader of the rebellion against Napoleon, and they fought the forces that were trying to completely destroy them. Yeah, an innkeeper, a robot trucker is correct, an innkeeper. So yeah, and that has a lot of parallels with the Anglo-Boer War, where the South Tyroleans were also mostly just humble farmers, and the Anglo-Boer War, in the Anglo-Boer War, the Boers were also just mostly farmers. So you have the same type of dynamic, this David and Goliath type of story, a big imperial force versus a small humble team of people defending what they love. And then the second parallel, where the South Tyroleans have a lot of sympathy with Afrikaners, is what the Italian fascists tried to do to them after 1922, and that was the process of Italianization, where they had to rename their streets from German to Italian. Towns and cities were renamed. That's why Bozen has two names, Bolzano in Italian and Bozen in German. But at that time, it was just Bolzano because of the Italianization process. The closing of German schools, outlawing of German schools, heavy fines for anyone teaching their children in German. Italian was made the only legitimate or valid language in public. Some of these South Tyroleans, they were even forced to change their names from German names and German surnames to Italian names and Italian surnames. And then a lot more like job reservation for Italians only. A lot of parallels there with BEE. This is just for the reason of the Italian government trying to demographically change the South Tyrol so that it is less German and more Italian. But that's just scratching the surface. So you've got this Italianization process that they effectively resisted, which gives them, which is the source of a lot of their sympathy for what's going on in South Africa. And I think a lot of your South African viewers, with some of the things that I mentioned there, a lot of it is more radical than what we face here in South Africa, but a lot of it has a lot of parallels with what's going on here, which is just an assault against the minority culture by a government.
That's absolutely true. Let me answer a couple questions in the chat really quickly here. Wolf said Tyrol is part of Austria, is it not? Well, Tyrol is in three regions. You have Südtirol, which is in Italy. You have Osttirol, Eastern Tyrol, which is in Austria, a very remote part of Austria. And then you have what is known as Tyrol. And of course, Innsbruck is the capital of Tyrol, that region. All of that together is the Tyrolean region. And it's kind of divided up. So South Tyrol, as we mentioned here, has been part of Italy since the end of the First World War. A reward for their betrayal of the Triple Entente. There, they bailed on and switched sides, so they got rewarded with that territory, which they had eyes on for such a long time. And it's also the site of incredible battles in the First World War: Austro-Hungarian forces and German forces against Italians and Allied forces there. So many fatalities. The Alonso Front, the Isonzo Front, and all these different places in the Dolomites. It's interesting. You talk about what happened. But two major events happened in South Tyrol that sort of got the government to start looking the other way. And I don't encourage this, and we certainly not looking for this. But in the 1950s, there was a breakaway independence movement, and some people resorted to terrorism. There were terrorist attacks against infrastructure. And again in the 1980s. But as a consequence of the events in the 1950s, they started moving towards this point where South Tyrol is a semi-autonomous province now inside of Italy. And as I mentioned, it's the most prosperous. The Italianization did have a major impact, but it has been reversed in some respects. At one point, much of the province was approaching 60-40 as far as German and Italian. Now it's back up to over 2/3 ethnic Germans. And it's probably, I would say for the Italians, a healthy mix right now. They've kind of hands off, but it is part of Italy. If you look at all the alpine skiers for Italy, with the exception of Alberto Tomba, every Italian downhill skier that's done well in the Olympics has been an Austrian. Just saying. But anyway, yeah, so it is interesting. There are a lot of parallels. I did not know that anyone in the Afrikaans speaking community was reaching out to South Tyrol. It's one of my favorite places. I know it intimately. I know innkeepers who have a lodge there just across the border from Austria. And I have been everywhere in that territory. It's an amazing place. The geography is incredible. How did you get there? Did you fly into Italy or did you fly in Austria? Or did you drive there? What?
No, we flew to Geneva, and Geneva in English, and then from there we took the train all the way down to Italy.
Oh wow! So that's quite a roundabout way.
Yeah, that was the third leg of the trip. The first two, or the first two, was the speech at the UN, and then the report.
And both of those were in Geneva, in Genf?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Geneva, of course, is the French-speaking portion of Switzerland. Genf is the German name for it. Geneva is the French name, and Geneva, of course, the English version. So what do you call it in Afrikaans?
Genève.
Genève. Okay, there you go. Just like the French. Okay, makes sense. So, yeah, that's fascinating. I had no idea that was part of it. And as you can see, I'm quite enthusiastic about Südtirol. And Andreas Hofer. I've actually stayed in the Andreas Hofer Inn in South Tyrol.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have that privilege. We just visited the museum about the war, and then also his that panorama monument, and then also his statue in Innsbruck.
I was going to say, yeah, there's one in Innsbruck up on the same hill where the Olympic Park is at. I've been there many, many times. It's pretty cool. It's a great view of looking out over the Inntal. It's the Inn Valley, because the Inn is the river. For those who don't know, Innsbruck is the bridge over the Inn River. The Inntal is the valley. Anyway, so there. Enough of that. All right, let's shift gears a little bit there. Unless there's something else you want to share about your visit to South Tyrol. Did you meet with any political parties or
No.
just civic leaders?
Well, we firstly met with the representatives of the Afrikaner South Tyrol Friendship Organization, and then some of their members were then people that we did interviews with for a documentary that we're currently making on autonomy and federalism. And one of them was a parliament member in the South Tyrol in South Tyrol, and then also we met with the previous president of South Tyrol, Dr. Durenwalder.
Oh yeah, that's a name I recognize. When I lived in Italy, I actually had a newspaper subscription. The German language daily out of Bozen is the Dolomiten, and I used to get every day in the Italian-speaking portion of Italy. In my mail would be delivered the daily newspaper in German from South Tyrol. Pretty cool place. It is fascinating. So I'm glad you got a chance to go there. I'll have to chat more about this offline. But let's shift a little bit to Geneva. So 2 minutes. That's a lot of stuff to talk about in 2 minutes. I mean, did you split the time evenly with Ernst, or did he get all the time, or did you get 10 seconds? How did that work?
No, if we were to split, that would take up valuable seconds. So Ernst took the full 2 minutes, and but we fit in the speeches on AfriForum's YouTube channel, and I'm also going to be discussing and watching the speech again and dissecting a little bit on my channel after this. But yeah, it was 2 minutes, but we covered most of the important stuff that we thought, because there's a lot of NGOs and states representatives there. So to fit everything in, they could only give us 2 minutes. And what also happens, and we can talk about that later, but it's a less serious, is that sometimes the states start fighting with each other, and then that pauses the entire program. But yeah, we mentioned, I think, the most important things, and some of those are, for example, anti-minority incitement to violence and hate speech by people like Julius Malema, corporations in the private sector, putting stopping the hiring or promotion of people based on race, specifically white employees like Diskim. Then also in the past 2 years, the racist tourism relief fund that refused to give funds to small businesses because their management was too white. The case of the Tears Foundation that fights gender-based violence in South Africa that couldn't get funding from the government because their management was too white. Then also specifically the threat of expropriation without compensation, and then also the fact that Ernst also ended off his speech with the fact that when it comes to the UN, they need to be less focused on diplomacy and being diplomatic with these states, and rather building their connections and ties with people on the ground and with peoples rather than governments. Then they will get a lot more done when it comes to actually intervening in regards to helping minority groups. But at the same time, and we will get into that, our mission with this was not to convince the UN to now come save us here in South Africa. There's a lot of other stuff that we achieve that's a lot more important and realistic. But yeah, first, if there's anything you'd like to comment there before we get into that.
Well, actually, I was going to ask. I'm sure that a lot of people are curious because you will get a lot of people who are skeptics of the United Nations. Now, I've worked in diplomacy for several decades, and so I know how this works, and I know the value of diplomacy even when it appears not evident to the average person. But I'll give you a chance to answer that. I think I know the answer, and we'll see if it bears out. But here's the thing. Most people are going to say, why are you wasting your time? Why are you going to the United Nations? It's a feckless, useless organization that does an abysmal job with peacekeeping, that does nothing but attack Western governments. What is it going to do? Why would you waste your time? Now, you're going to have viewers. They're going to ask that question. And I think it's a fair question given the perception of the United Nations by many people. And I'm not saying it's a great organization or a bad organization. So your response to that, and I suspect I know the answer. Let's see if I'm right. Tell me, why bother going to the UN? What's the point? 2 minutes.
Let's start off with an example. The first example is the fact that the South African government didn't even bother to show up to use their opportunity to give feedback and report back to the United Nations on minority issues in their country. So the United Nations representatives were sitting there. They were saying, okay, now they have this long program. They say now next up, it is the opportunity for this NGO or for this organization, and there are representatives of states there as well. So then when South Africa's turn came up, the United Nations representative said, the chairperson said, can the South African delegation please give their feedback or report? And then there was just this deafening silence because the South African representative didn't even bother to be there when it was their opportunity to give feedback. So that just shows you the South African government's attitude when it comes to how they view minority issues and discrimination against minorities in their own country. But that leads me now to answer your question more directly. Why is it important that AfriForum use these type of opportunities and attend these types of events? Because then the only people there to give feedback on South Africa was AfriForum. The South African government didn't bother to be there. So someone had to give feedback on what was going on here. So AfriForum was the only South African voice in the entire room. And that, firstly, everything we said there is true. Everything can be found. Everything that we mentioned there is highly sourced, and it's easy to find. But the most important thing is it establishes AfriForum as a leading voice internationally. So this is very important for legitimacy and for opening up other opportunities. It builds that legitimacy and that reputation abroad, which is worth its weight in gold. And then those doors that it opens gives you more opportunities to meet with the types of people that you'd like to meet to actually start bringing about some big change and to cooperate with other NGOs, for example. The entire room was filled with NGOs, and you do your speech in front of that room full of people from all across the world, representatives of states. The representative of the United States was there, from the representative of European countries were there, everyone was there. So they all listen to your speech, and they all get to hear what the South African government is up to. And the South African government didn't even bother to try and refute anything that we said. So that's the other thing that's important. Then also, it puts racial discrimination in South Africa, what's going on what the South African government is doing. It puts it on the record, the historical record, and the international community's just record of attention, where nobody in the future will be able to say, or nobody now in the present will be able to say, well, we didn't know that this was going on in South Africa. Nobody warned us. Nobody put this before us. No, it's all on the record, and this is all contributing to that. Another thing that's important is the contact list that you build up, and I've touched on this, and that's the fact that you meet a lot of very important people here. You get to connect with other NGOs also fighting for similar on linguistic fronts, cultural fronts, other NGOs representing cultural minorities, linguistic minorities in their countries, and you can learn lessons from them. It's valuable contacts to have if you in the future were to do a mission in that country to spread awareness there about what's going on in South Africa. You can connect with those NGOs because they met you at this event. So, and lastly, but this is not one of the main things that we try to achieve, but it is nice. It just upsets the race merchants and the pro discrimination people, the pro discrimination activists. They just wrecked. They're just crying and screaming online. And the fact that the South African government in recent history tried to block us from getting registering to get a speaking turn here and to register with ECOSOC, for example, shows how this isn't just something that they view as trivial. The fact that AfriForum attends these types of things is something that they don't want. It's something that they actively try to stop. And yeah, so the last thing, like I said, the last thing is just if you were to measure it by the reaction from the people that support or the people that excuse discrimination against minorities and hate speech against minorities, then it was a big success as well, just seeing how they lost their heads.
Well, that pretty much summed up a lot of what I would have said. You're building networks and connections that can prove crucial, and you never know which connection may be invaluable at some point in the future. So that's useful. It's on the record now, and that's critically important. I don't think people realize how important it is to get things on the record. And you also talked about kind of annoying the race hustlers, the race merchants. I actually enjoyed that. But it does speak volumes that the South African government, which always under the African National Congress, alludes to the United Nations, multilateral. And then when they have an opportunity to show up and speak about an issue that they claim isn't an issue, they don't even have the courtesy to show up. And by the way, they do have South African delegation in Geneva, if I'm not mistaken, at the United Nations. So the fact that they didn't bother to show up just shows how disrespectful, inconsiderate, and how unseriously they take the issue. It's like watching the parliamentary vote earlier. It's just a joke. These ANC members aren't politicians. They're just party hacks who owe their loyalty to Lutuli House, and they don't care what they do to the country. And look, I'm not just going to pick on South Africa. It's no different than D.C. I mean, Democrats just voted en masse. Every single one of them voted for another piece of legislation. They vote lockstep. They don't even vote for the constituents of the people. It's really sad. Now, when you were in Geneva, how were you received? I presume professionally, but I mean, were you warmly welcomed by UN officials, or were they skeptical? Or, I mean, because obviously you had to wait around, you had to meet with people, you had to schedule, you had to get security credentials to go in, all this stuff. So, I mean, what was the reception like by the United Nations in Geneva?
Very standard. I mean, what you said there is true. You have to get your clearance. So you'll see in the video we both have our little
Badge.
name tag or official tag, and with that you have access to this forum, and you have access to the building, and the people don't look twice at you. So this was very important. This also played a role, and this is naturally the next thing that I wanted to talk about with the report. When we went to CERD, which is also a wing of the United Nations, but the anti-discrimination specifically, we could just show that we show our clearance tags that we just went to and they said, yeah, it's fine, and we just need to go through the scanner, and they were very, very friendly and helpful. There was no like, why are you here? Where are you from? They just wanted to know, like, but it was basically just show us your name tags and just give us your names, and like very briefly give us the reason why you're here, not like an interrogatory way, just in a standard procedural way. So that's another example of just the doors that it opens. It very much facilitated our handing in of the report as well, which went a lot better than we expected. We thought we were going to, because we did let them know we were going to hand in this report. And maybe before I get more into that, I just give you some background. So this report is pretty much on the same things that we did our speech at the UN on, but this is more specifically going into a
Now,
lot
Ernst,
more detail.
sorry to interrupt you. Are you talking about the report, The World Must Know? Is that the report you're referring to?
No, this is a new one. It
Okay.
takes a lot from the World Must Know report, but it specifically focuses on discrimination and hate speech against minorities. The World Must Know is a lot more, it covers a lot more bases, a lot more topic. This specifically focuses on discrimination and hate speech, and it's also updated. So it's updated in regards to what has happened since the release of the World Must Know report that we discussed on your channel. So this report, we then went to search, handed in there. And yeah, we went in, and what we were expecting, at least, is that we handed to them, they say thank you, and then we are on our way. But they were actually very curious about the contents. They wanted to see some of it. They actually told us about something that is very important. They said that in 2023, the South African government is set to be reviewed by CERD in regards to how it's dealing with discrimination in the country. And now that we've handed this report in, it will now be considered as part of that review process. And then they said we should be in contact, that if we want to be part of the process, that could be a possibility. We just need to correspond with them in the coming year. And that's excellent. That's not how you talk to someone you want to get rid of. That's not how you talk to someone that you just want to, yeah, whatever, goodbye. They really wanted to give us all the detail that we need. They were genuinely curious about the contents of our report. And yeah, to end off, to simply answer your question, we were very received very welcoming and very friendly. And I'm very sure that this report is now going to play a large role in that review process. But there's still a lot to do if we want to be physically present during that review process. But this is a first step in that direction.
Now, is there a revisit in the offing? Did they give you another invitation to come back, or is there another event at some point, or at the moment is this just a one-off for Geneva?
The next thing that's on our radar is specifically this review process next year. I think it's going to happen closer to the end of next year. So now my responsibility
the
specifically
review
is
process
to,
for the South African government that you referred to.
for the South African
Okay,
government, yeah. So my responsibility now is to correspond with them to get all the details and to make sure that we're part of that process. But we'll keep people up to date.
Well, you have an opportunity to potentially be part of that process now because you made this trip. Otherwise, you would have been excluded from this.
The report is already going to be part of the process, but there's potential for more involvement from AfriForum side as well. That's the next step.
Well, that's interesting. We'll see what happens there. Now, you guys have been making trips around the world. You've been to Washington. You've been to Geneva. If I'm not mistaken, I think someone even went to Germany and the Netherlands for AfriForum, or is that not true?
Excuse me?
I said that AfriForum, I see you're looking at the chat over there, that AfriForum has been making trips around the world. You've been to D.C., you've been to Geneva. If I'm not mistaken, you've also been to the Netherlands and to Germany as an organization. Is that correct?
Well, there's been a lot of trips before I started working at AfriForum, so I might not even be aware of many of them. Yeah. But yeah, the ones that have happened since I've been at AfriForum have been to the United States multiple times. There's been to Geneva before I started working there, a year before. There was also a trip to the Netherlands. And then, before I started working there, I know there've been trips to other European countries as well, and also to Australia. But yeah, this is my first international liaison trip.
So I don't know if you paid attention to this or if it was part of what was going on, but did anybody notice, or was there any interest from the media either in Geneva or when you were in South Tyrol about your visit and any coverage of it that you're aware of?
No, I didn't really encounter any media there, but it is pretty difficult seeing as you can't really, we don't have a lot of contacts within the Swiss media there. So yeah, it was going to be a game of chance whether you get the opportunity to talk to some journalists. But yeah, that opportunity didn't arise. There wasn't someone that came to find us to ask us questions. So yeah, no, not from the local media side. We didn't get an interview now.
Well, that's a shame, particularly if you get back to South Tyrol. I think the Dolomite would probably be very interested in running, talking a story about that. They definitely cover stories about ethnic Germans and or ethnic Austrians, technically, inside of Italy. So maybe next time someone can coordinate your, I don't know, AfriForum's media liaison, but I think that's something they ought to take advantage of. Don't miss an opportunity to get press if you can. You can't guarantee whether it's going to be positive or negative, but you can at least get the press coverage just so people are aware of it. I think that's interesting. I had no idea that that there was a South Tyrol and South African friendship organization. That's news to me. I had no idea. If I'd known that, I'd have been digging into that a long time ago. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, let me just get the German name, if you want to go find it on Facebook. It's a page that you can like, is the Suid-Tiroler Vriendeskreis der Afrikaner. I'll put the
That's a mouthful.
text in the chat. So if anyone, I highly encourage people to go like the page. They put up a lot of daily content, which is very interesting.
Okay, now the way you pronounce it, see, now I get attacked all the time, my German pronunciation Afrikaans. Your Afrikaans pronunciation in German was probably as bad as my German pronunciation Afrikaans. So the correct pronunciation for that would be Südtiroler Freudenkreis der Afrikaner. So Freudenkreis is a friendship circle, is what that is. I guess
a vriendenkring.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's so very similar to Afrikaans. Of course, both Germanic languages in origin. So, yeah, no, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to have to check that out on Facebook and just see what's going on.
Yeah, go get active on that page. I think you'll enjoy it.
I think you'd find it virtually impossible to find another American on the planet that has such strong ties to South Tyrol and South Africa and its Afrikaans-speaking community.
Well, then that's perfect.
That would make me the unicorn in the room, or as we say in German, Einhorn.
No, in Afrikaans, eenhoring.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, so one horn. Anyway, so it sounds like it was a very productive and interesting trip.
No, absolutely. And like I said, the most important thing here is just building that legitimacy, building AfriForum's reputation abroad as the go-to organization. If you want to know what's going on, if you want to get the true facts on what's going on the ground, get the full picture, then you talk to AfriForum, and we're well on our way to establishing ourselves as that organization. We also had a very good conversations there with the special rapporteur for minority issues there from the United Nations, and then we also corresponded with their High Commissioner for Human Rights in regards to the report as well. So those are just some of the conversations that we had. And then I think what's also important to note when it comes to trips like this is the fact that when it comes to your allies and your friends abroad, when you are in trouble, you're going to want to have people that have your back, and people that almost act as your ambassadors, people that if they hear lies being told about AfriForum or about Afrikaners or about the ANC's racist policies abroad, they can challenge that and say, no, that's not true. We've heard it firsthand from organizations like AfriForum that's not true what you're saying there. So that's also a great advantage, is that when you build these friendship networks and you build these contacts and you inform them about what's going on, you just create this massive network of ambassadors that help with spreading the truth about what's going on in South Africa.
Well, Ernst, I think that's a very good point you make there, and I'm glad you brought it to that. You know, it's very easy, particularly in the age of social media and also with legacy media, the way they behave, that you can paint a picture of even the most honest and stalwart of people and their character and assassinate them and make claims about them that are simply untrue. I mean, if you wanted, you could actually make it look like Mother Teresa was a terrible person if you tried. I mean, that's how easy it is to do in this day and age. So when people know you, when they've met you, when they've seen you, when they've interacted with you, and someone says something that's against you, they're going to have a question in their mind. Wait a second. I've met Ernst. I've met AfriForum. I've been to their website. I've read their literature. I've seen what they're involved in. This doesn't jive. It doesn't make sense. But without that interaction, you get a false narrative. For instance, two things that come to mind here. Number one, Orania, which is a private corporation, of course, in South Africa, has been falsely portrayed as a racist, whites-only community, it's almost entirely a white community, but it's not because it's a whites-only community. It's because people have chosen to live together there and others haven't chosen to live there under their rules. And AfriForum has been maligned in the South African press endlessly and misrepresented, talking about it's a white minority group that only represents one group. While AfriForum does have the interest of white Afrikaans-speaking South Africans at its core interest, it has shown interest and helped other groups in South Africa, including, if I'm not mistaken, some Basotho groups and a Xhosa group as well with advice. And that really isn't something the mainstream narrative ever lets get out. So it's really good when you have these interactions so people really know what's going on. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, that's precisely the point, is that you need those allies. You can't do it alone, and it's a theme that keeps coming to the fore. And I'm actually writing an opinion piece on it specifically now. Is that no folk is an island, no people can be an island. You need those friends, you need those allies, and they're going to come in handy if you are ever attacked, or if you are ever lied about, or if falsehoods are spread about you. And I think this is that's why I'm so glad to see that the South Tyroleans have indicated that they are definitely friends of the Afrikaners, that they our fight for freedom resonates with them, and they also feel strong sense of pity for the fact that we are targeted in the same way, or in a similar way, as they were culturally targeted by a hateful regime.
Well, the one key difference, of course, for you versus South Tyrol is that at a distance, South Tyroleans look the same as Italians for the most part,
right,
from that region. And whereas a minority with, as I say, a lacking pigmentation like the two of us do, it's pretty easy to spot you from a distance. And that makes it much easier for people with hatred or with a malicious intent to single you out. Whereas in South Tyrol, it's a bit more challenging, particularly when there's more German speakers than Italians in most of South Tyrol. But certainly I can see how they'd empathize with the situation for Afrikaners in South Africa. And it's fascinating to hear this what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess the Afrikaans word there, the link there that you came up with. That's this linkage. It's pretty cool to see. So from the trip, anything else you'd like to share with us, or anything about campaigns or events that AfriForum is working on, or you're working on right now, coming up in the near future?
Right. So the thing that I'm working on is the documentary called Self-Bestuur. It's going to be released early next year. 15th of February on AfriForum's YouTube channel, and also on AfriForum TV. It's going to be a documentary on federalism and autonomy. And we, among other people, do interviews with the South Tyroleans, and then also with many other thinkers in regards to self-bestuur and doing things yourself. When it comes to final thoughts from the trip, I think what I've learned, or what I experienced as well, is this federal idea of, for example, the best example was when we were on the train through Switzerland and driving through the cantons, and you can maybe explain to your audience a bit more how that works. But when we were in Geneva, we got the very strong sense that you're in a French city. We might as well be in a city in France. All the signs are in French. The intercom over the train is French. People speak French. And then as we drove into Bern, which is a bilingual canton, German and French, we got German over the intercom and French, and we saw German and French signage and German and French instructions. And then as we drove through Zurich, which is a German canton, we got only German over the intercom, and everything got a lot more German on the train station as well. So that was just a very cool experience to experience that federalism in practice in regards to different linguistic groups, but also different cultural groups. And yeah, that was very insightful to experience.
No, absolutely. You know, you're right. It's interesting. For me, it's second nature, of course, because I spent so much of my life living in Europe and living in that region and going from one place to another. Like I said, I was in Bolzano. I'd speak German. They'd speak Italian. We'd understand each other because I didn't speak Italian fluently, but I could understand it. And, you know, the same vice versa. And it's the same in Switzerland. The only thing that always throws me for a loop is when I get to the eastern part of Switzerland, where they speak Rhédo-Romanche, and I have no idea what they're saying. It's a Romance language. Now that I speak French, I've been back there since I learned French. It's been a long time, but you know, that's kind of an odd one. It's a very small percentage of population. German is most widely spoken in Switzerland, followed by French, followed by Italian, and then Rhédo-Romanche, a very small portion. But the multicultural aspect you talk about, Switzerland lives in harmony. The Italians, the French, the German speakers, the Radio Romanche are not each other's throats. They're not killing each other. They live in a confederation in which there are separate entities akin to a state or province in the U.S. and South Africa, the cantons you talk about. And it's a federal system, which is what we have here, a federal system. Switzerland's worked very well for many centuries, and it's, I think, a good model in many respects for countries to emulate. And I think one thing, let me get this before we wrap up, is I think that, and this is important with AfriForum, AfriForum is not an organization that, these are my words, so if it's incorrect, you can correct me. It's not an organization focused on exclusion, but rather inclusion of people from one community, one folk, and not to the detriment of others, simply for promotion of that one group within itself. And then other groups are welcome to be themselves as neighbors. And I think, is that a fair statement, or have I mischaracterized something?
Well, absolutely. We don't want to take anything away from anyone. We just want to create and build. We want to give people more, and we want to give people things that they deserve. We want to give, for example, minority communities, I think in South Africa, deserve not to be discriminated against or to be chanted about their brutal murder. I think that's a very reasonable thing to ask for. I think farmers in South Africa deserve not to be brutally murdered or to have politicians sing about killing them and shooting them, or have journalists excuse their murder as just normal crime. I think that's a very reasonable thing to ask. If there's one thing we want to take away, that is it would be from anyone else, it would be the South African government's ability to discriminate against people. That would be something we would very gladly take away, and very decisively take away. But in regards to taking away things from other cultural groups or linguistic communities or anything, no, absolutely not. We're a building organization. We're not a pillaging organization or a destructive organization. We don't burn, we don't destroy. We build, and we rejuvenate, and we preserve.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that, Ernst, it's probably a good spot for us to wrap it up here for today. Thank you for your time on short notice. To let folks know, Ernst was in Switzerland and reached out to me about coming on, but this travel schedule was just too hectic. We weren't able to do it. And I was intending to get Ernst Rutz and Ernst Van Zyl on for the same conversation. Hopefully, maybe we can get Ernst Rutz on in January after he comes back from whatever big hunting trip he's probably on right now. And we'll get him on. But Ernst, it's always a pleasure to have the Conscious Clerical on here. Or as today, you're not here as a Conscious Clerical, but as a representative of AfriForum. So bye-bye, donkey. Thank you for that. And I'll give you the last word, and I'll let you drop off. And then technically it's not the last word because I close the program out, but you get the last substantive word. So any last comments, and then I'll let you drop off.
My last substantive word would be thank you just very much for everyone's support of AfriForum. That support makes what we do possible. Thank you for everyone that's become a member. If you're an international listener, you can become a member by becoming a friend of AfriForum. If you live in South Africa, just go to the AfriForum website and click join. It's that easy. And then tonight at 7 o'clock South Africa time, that's in 1 hour, I will be answering more questions and giving more feedback on this trip, specifically on my own channel on Conscious Clerical. So you can join me there tonight if you have any other questions, or if you just want to come listen. I'll see you there in about an hour. But thanks again for the opportunity, Chris. Always a pleasure coming to chat to you here. And I'll chat to you again real soon.
Excellent, folks. Ernst Van Zyl, also known as the Conscious Clerical, who is a strategy and campaigns manager with AfriForum. I'll put a link in the video after this. He's coming on as a representative of AfriForum, so I didn't put his Conscious Clerical link in there, but I will put it in there because he does use that channel to represent AfriForum as well. So anyway, folks, thank you very much for tuning in for this. The odd time, we didn't have a huge audience, but hopefully people watch it after the fact, and I do appreciate your support. I'll be back in about 10 minutes, maybe a couple minutes late, for news at the top of the hour. And of course, some of the news is the South African Parliament voted against accepting its own independently commissioned report, which should be interesting to see. We'll talk about that, and of course the handful of those who voted against Cyril Ramaphosa and for justice, but only a handful, and they did it for political reasons, obviously not for right or wrong. But thanks a lot for tuning in, folks, and thank you to Ernst Van Zyl. It's good to see him once again, and I'll be back with the news here shortly. Appreciate your support. Be sure to hit the like button if you don't mind, and we'll see you shortly right here on Chris Wyatt Africa for the news. Cheers, everybody.